Hello and welcome to a video analyzing graphic design in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Just a quick little disclaimer, this video will feature gameplay and cutscenes from the first two chapters of Xenoblade 3. But yeah, either way I recommend you play at least some of this game first before watching this video. This video will primarily focus on the menu and UI design in the game, as they both work together to make it feel like you're seeing what the characters themselves are seeing, in a really interesting way. A lot of the game's UI and menu design revolves around something that exists within Ionios, which is the iris. Everyone born in Ionios is born with an iris. It's almost like a futuristic contact lens, which is programmed with a bunch of additional augmented reality-esque information that the characters can see at any moment's notice. It's often used throughout cutscenes throughout the game to display, maps or information or classes or things that the characters can see and unlock. Now the main cool thing is that in these cutscenes, the visual style of the iris actually matches the way the menus and the UI look. All the things that the characters see are in orange, and the background in all these scenes is usually a dark purple, which in terms of color design creates a nice contrast, which allows, I guess, both the characters in the game and the player to see the stuff in orange easier. Now, if you may or may not know, UI actually means user interface. It usually encompasses all the menus or heads-up displays or graphics which are overlaid on top of the game, which the player has access to if they need additional information which the gameplay doesn't provide. However, in the case of Xenoblade 3, the user interface actually applies to the characters as well, since they have to deal with the UI of the irises themselves. Of course, this also applies to battles, where in this case, the enemy's stats, health bar, information level, as well as your own parties, are displayed mostly in orange with other colors, symbols, and information displayed if necessary. When you're too far away to auto-attack, there's a little icon that actually disappears and reappears that shows when you can actually auto-attack. It's also next to an arrow, which also helps show your positioning. It's clean and out of the way if you don't necessarily need it, but it's really well designed. I personally prefer the way they did it in Xenoblade Definitive Edition, where they made a little exclamation mark thing when an art was most effective. But also this way, you have to think about it a bit more, which is nice. Xenoblade 1 Definitive was my first Xenoblade game, and the way I played it was whenever I saw an exclamation mark, I thought, okay, I have to use this art now, at least for a good portion of my playthrough. But then in this game, you get to actually think a bit more since it doesn't have that feature. But then adding the arrow is just a great change. It's something that Xenoblade 2 didn't have at all to show you how it worked, so it's very nice that that's a thing. This is even more the case when it comes to the minimap, which is very much stylized to look like, the map seen in different cutscenes, where it's all in orange and the characters can see where they are on it. The iris is also a perfect excuse to have exclamation mark points that you can actually see in the world, which is new for the Xenoblade series, as in Xenoblade 1, at least the remake, you would follow the minimap to see where you go, and then in 2 you had a compass at the top, but 3 makes it even easier where you can just actually see where it is in the world, which kind of gives this whole augmented reality aesthetic an extra bump in effectiveness. Of course, a lot of these elements wouldn't make a lot of sense if the characters themselves could see them, but it can be assumed that, things such as the attack up ring could be possibly seen by the characters. Or even having a break, topple, and daze timer is something that would be feasible. Even temporary UI elements such as the landmark unlocks or other prompts that only show up for a short amount of time could be also seen by the characters. Another neat thing is that all the items have a white stroke around them, almost like the irises can detect when items of interest or use are around. And then when you pick the item up, there's a little display which is useful for both the player and maybe even the characters can get to see for themselves what item they just found. Like the iris is kind of examining it and detecting it. It's pretty neat. Of course, this AR system also allows the navigation tool in this game, with the orange glowing lines that show you the way to go. Makes it very feasible that the characters can actually see it. Creates a great sense of immersion. And also the way it shows up and the whole world goes purple and orange is an excellent touch. It's really stylized to match the way that the characters see stuff in those AR cutscenes. The game also has a whole system of Collectorpedia Cards, which is an in-game mechanic where you can check what other NPCs need and then deliver them those items throughout the game. But it's also implied that characters can see the Collectorpedia cards themselves, which is reinforced by the fact that the card itself is designed in a way to match the aesthetic of the iris. You can also see text boxes that show what the character thinks about the request, or like different messages that they're saying, and then you get a second message when you complete the order, which is really cute. A little thank you message. There are also some pop-ups which show like subtitles or messages of what the characters are seeing or saying through the iris system. All in all, the game is designed in a way to make you feel like it's possible that all that you're seeing the characters can see as well. The iris does have its weakness though. A lot of its communication features can be interrupted by the black fog, which is something that appears multiple times throughout the story and changes the effectiveness of the iris. In particular, in Chapter 2, Consul K, as a member of Mobius, is allowed to use his Mobius iris to control the irises of people who have a normal soldier iris, which allows him in a messed up way to directly control and change what the characters can actually see, which is why when Ethel is under his influence, she sees characters and monsters instead of Noah and the gang. So the game can directly influence what the characters see just by changing something in the iris, which is interesting. Seeing something through the iris means seeing something through a pair of AR goggles that someone else has control of. It's kind of horrifying. Now, a minor complaint I do have about the menus as a whole is that while, yes, they are designed in a way that makes you feel super immersed and it matches what the characters would be seeing through their irises, it also takes away a bit from the immersion simply by just having menu music. While I love this song, it's great. It does take a bit away from the immersion when it kicks in every time you check your menus. I think it'd be way more interesting if when you pulled up the menu, you could still see what was going on in the world behind, and you can still hear the music to make it feel like you are still present in that world. These menus are designed in a super interesting way. The character's stats pages are really well designed, with the way everything kind of moves and shifts slowly to create a sense of, I don't know, fluidity, which was especially present in the last game, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, where the menus were very static and didn't have a lot of animation. This feels way more alive from the multiple different layers of animation going on, from the particle effects, to the glowy fiery thing behind skills, to the whole stats page slowly shifting up and down. Of course, the way the characters show up in this menu might not be exactly how, the characters themselves see it, but they could probably just look at their different party members and see these stat pages pop up next to them, which is really cool. But these hologram styles are really neat to look at. My main complaint with the graphic design of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which I might talk about if I ever make a video on it, is that in the menus the characters were represented not by a 3D model, but by their character art. This by itself is not a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing in the case of Xenoblade 2, where there were a bunch of different artists that worked together to create the art of that game, which created a style which looked very cheap, with all the different art styles mashed together in the blade menus. Using the 3D models from the game itself, when looking at a character and looking at the party as a whole, is way better and way cleaner, and it feels like, it's actually designed for the game and the world. In fact, all the different menus kind of work this way, animated slightly to make it feel, open and spacious, but also are designed in this orange and purple aesthetic, which simulates what the characters themselves would see. The only couple of exceptions are of course the world maps, which are pretty static, as they're just an image. And I'm not sure if the characters are actually seeing this colorful image that, the player is. And of course the expansion pass, which takes you to a whole separate menu, but, by principle, this isn't, part of what the characters are seeing. It's just extra content that the player can buy. Even small things, like I never saw this menu in my first playthrough, but the controls page is actually designed in a super immersive way, which I think is really cool. Of course, if you played through at least half of Chapter 1, you'd know that this flame clock that shows up is a complete debate. It goes away in like an hour. But its presence there is interesting enough. It feels out of place compared to other design elements for this game. And it's almost there like taunting you or haunting you as you're just going about your business, which is really interesting because both in concept it's just like it's designed in a way that's a bit out of place, but also it represents the abnormal ticking of time that's present in the lives of these characters. And, you can actually see the characters have the flame clock in the bottom left of their iris, which actually lines up with where it shows up in the menu while it's still present for that short amount of time. When it comes to the loading screen, it actually, for the entire game, it stays a flame clock. In a way that's really interesting because it's a constant reminder of time running out throughout the entire adventure, which is a big theme of the game. Even when you're freed from your own Colony 9 flame clock, the icon remains the flame clock. It doesn't change to an Ouroboros or anything. The time is always there. Almost everything in this game uses the same font, Not sure exactly what font it is, but it's a sans serif font, which looks very clean, almost Helvetica-esque, which gives a very futuristic, modern feel to everything. It's also very sharp, unlike the font used in Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, which was more rounded. To match the more casual fantasy aspect of the start of that game, this game feels a lot more modern with its weapons and technology, and especially with the iris system, that a sharper, cleaner font works really well. Rest spots also have a cute little thing where the save icon is represented by a diary, and if you've played the game you know that this is Mio's diary. And at the end of every chapter she kind of logs the progress that happened throughout that chapter. So it's kind of symbolic of, you know, logging your progress and Mio manually writing down what happened since the last time you saved. All in all, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 makes great use of immersion. It uses something present in the game's world and reuses the visual style of that element being the iris throughout everything else throughout the game. And it's really interesting to see how that changes your perspective of the world and what the characters are going through, as it feels like you're seeing these different pieces of graphic design from their perspective. And to that extent, the graphic design is really effective in highlighting the information, which is both interesting to the player and by result interesting to the characters. So yeah, thanks for watching this first episode in a series I'm calling Graphic Design in Games, where I'm basically just analyzing different elements of graphic design throughout my favorite games. I might make some more Xenoblade related videos on this subject, either talking about different games or different aspects of the games, such as logo design or box art or things of the sort. But yeah, thanks for watching and take it easy.